Hello to all, here today in a follow-up commentary to my more recent Hakuryu video where we basically only spammed torpedoes in an effort to win the game, and we eventually did, but unfortunately we were unable to show off the prowess of her APDBs, so hopefully in this game today we'll be able to show them off. We have the infamous CV7, a fantastic player, don't look at his stats on the enemy side, but anyhow. We're in the Tier 10 Japanese tech tree aircraft carrier Hakuryu against an enemy Audacious, the Tier 10 British carrier, and then Conqueror, Yamato, Georgia, Musashi, North Carolina, so basically no AA. North Carolina is decent, but he's a Tier 8. And then Conqueror's alright, but only in the mid-range. Georgia's a Tier 9, so decent again, but not too impressive. And then Smolensk, Rune, Donskoy, Cleveland, Bayard. So of these I only really care about Smolensk and only when he's in a smokescreen, and the Cleveland kind of. And then a single Chungmu as the enemy destroyer. So we're on Tears of the Desert on updated epicenter, so I should have plenty of time in order to work my Hakuryu magic. Plenty of citadel targets here, Konk, Yamato, Georgia, Musashi, and North Carolina, all easily citadelable. Of course, a Georgia player is asking at secondaries. My Kitakaze spawned in the center, so I'm scouting the center with my rocket planes. Audacious scouting with his level bombers. There's the Chungmu. Find him on the first pass. Not going to bother to drop a fighter, instead I'm going to lead him on the minimap with my indicator, using the arrow line to kind of lead his bow. Then we arm early. He does juke us in this case. We get an in cap but no damage, and we have to dive in because of the angle, but this time I'm going to drop a fighter, so we don't get that happening again. We lost 2 fighters on the engagement inside. He's slowing to a stop, and he dodges the majority of the damage. Looks like we lost 4 aircraft in order to skim him slightly. He's going to continue to dive for the center, so I'm going to relaunch with torpedo bombers. When he's moving this far ahead, he's going to leave his potential AA escorts behind, which should allow me to dive in onto him. My Kitakaze is in danger of getting found out, so just to keep attention off him, I'm gonna give him a fighter. Spotted by aircraft. Going toward the expected location of the Chungmu. Probably, usually people turn in over here, and what do you know, there he is. Kept his AA on after the last engagement. He had it off initially, you'll note. But after he got found out, he kind of turned it back on. Pop my heal here. He shorts the torpedo. Good for you, sir. I'm a little too forward. Even though I'm not hitting him necessarily, just lighting him up is going to allow my teammates to shoot at him, although they don't seem to have been successful in actually connecting with him thus far. So they've actually taken the center at this point. Recall, I don't think he's running smokescreen, otherwise I would have smoked already, I reckon, so looks like he's running radar. Missed of that last pair of torpedoes from the looks of it, which is unfortunate. But now that I know that he's probably radar, Chungmu can dive in after him. In the meantime, my team has dispatched much of the threats here. He's trying to dive back out, pop my engine cooling. He's gonna beach here, which will make him an easy target for both myself and my Edinburgh. Or Edinburgh. Edinburgh? I think it's Edinburgh, technically. Some easy looping attacks. He's going to accelerate here after, so pretty good 5k rake. Continue to stay on him. The only real AA escort there is a Cleveland, and he's fairly damaged at this point. Once I've cleared out the Chungmu, I can move on. Haven't reached for the APDBs again because I'm focusing down this lone Chungmu. He has center control, and my Kitakaze has not yet appeared to figure out that We need center control, trying to get some spotting information here. Kind of armed, trying to hit the Bayard since he has a fighter. You can see it's going to be a pretty ugly spread. Pop a heal. Bayard doesn't have too many places to go. Unless he wants to beach. One hit onto the Bayard. Gonna light up the Changmu because my Kitakaze has finally entered the cap center. Hopefully my teammates will shoot at him. And from this angle he should have nowhere to go but forward. Alright, a bit under lead still. But he should be lit long enough to be forced to trade, and now I can make use of my APDB. It looks like the Yamato is pushing in. Changmu's still alive for some reason. At this point, now is the time to get some hits in on the Musashi. Gonna turn my hull around. You can see I'm behind cover, but otherwise I'm close to being spotted. So let's dissuade this Yamato from shoving in. Slingshotting to get into range. Ooh, almost too close here. Gonna have to drop kind of earlier than I would have liked to. So it looks like 9 kilometers was a bit too close. Gonna be turning in front of the enemy here, so do know I'm gonna take a bit of damage onto my hull, but that's fine. That's what HP on your hull is for. Only one citadel on that first pass. Looks like the Yamato might have been firing upon me. And you can see there he did indeed fire. Another citadel. But I'm almost completely turned at this point. So we should be fine to limp away. Looks like the George is shooting at me as well, and the Yamato still. Hopefully my armored flight deck can protect me from the majority of the damage. Flooding an engine here will slow down the Yamato. Focusing him because he's the one inside my spotting range. He fires again, but as the distance increases, it gets more and more difficult for him to inflict damage upon me. Still taking pretty heavy damage, at this point finally disengaged, because the Yamato has moved into cover. But now I'm vulnerable to the enemy carrier. Thankfully for me, it's an audacious, so he can really only damage me with torpedo bombers. Not a great angle there. I have to keep running at this point. Normally I would like to fight a bit more forward with my carrier hull, but can't always be done. Oh, briefly spotted. That's going to be dangerous. Undetected, as my carrier pulls ahead in a straight line. Thankfully Yamato was on a reload cycle. Georgia fires at maybe my last known position, it's possible. See if my hull takes any more damage. Oh, I'm going to be spotted by the Audacious. Triple citadel there onto the Yamato. With 6 aircraft left. Should be able to punch through and try and kill him. If I get another triple citadel, I will destroy the Yamato. And pretty much a solo kill. At this point, I need to slow the Georgia down. Don't want to get chased. Fairly straightforward game at this point. Although we did get a bit close while we were harassing the the Changmu, which was more than likely a radar Changmu. Now, however, we'll use these potent torpedo bombers and finish the job we started. It's gonna pop a fighter, that's fine. This first attack will go through, and we'll have time for one more attack. He's under pretty heavy in fire from my allies. Gonna pre-drop because I know I'm gonna dive into a fighter, so I only want to make one more pass. Don't want to feed him any planes. Dive out and away. He might just die from allies actually, so I'm gonna leave him to my allies. And that way I can spend the rest of my squadron onto this Musashi. Since I know things are going well, I feel safe enough to turn myself around and thus decrease the sortie time of my remaining strike packages. You can see the Musashi with her kind of Fuso-esque AA not exactly having a good time versus these bombers. Score a flood. Double flood, in fact. Not bad. Can we time out the damage control then? Probably not. Even with the short Japanese damage control, my torpedoes are just so fast that they're liable to connect before they can flood again. Oh, no, I actually did manage to wait it out. You can see here, normally I would recall with just one torpedo, but the Musashi's AA is so bad. I'm going to stick around for an extra hit, even with just 400 health. Very confident I can stick around, and, well, that was short. I don't expect my base experience to be very high. As you'll note, I basically did all my damage to one Yamato, but one Yamato is enough to kill me at 150,000 damage. This is done over 12 torpedo strikes, 9 bomb hits. Of the 9 bomb hits, 7 were citadels. Each citadel on a Hakuryu hits for, was it 8,500? So 8,500 by 7 it means that we have almost 60,000 citadel damage. This was on battleships, and that's 60,000 unhealable damage. So quite a crippling amount. 4 incapacitations, some through torpedoes, some through bombs. 1 actual kill, that's the Yamato that we bludgeoned to death. 4 floods, 1 defended ribbon, 12 spotting ribbons, and 12 rocket hits. The Changmu did try his best to evade us, but eventually we got to him. Team score wise, not very impressive as I mentioned. All my damage is battleship damage, and we did mainly just harass the one battleship. So only 1,300 here, but fairly low base experience game. You can see very one-sided match. Didn't even get to finish off that Musashi that we were harassing. 80,000 on the Yamato. You of course took 57 from raw bomb damage, as I mentioned. And then the Musashi and Georgia mostly torpedoes. Pretty short match in the Hakuryu, but there you saw. So imagine that you're just in a ranked game scenario where you don't care so much about your base experience and just in terms of securing a win or a loss. You can see there that one Yamato basically got eliminated by me almost single-handedly. He took 87,000 damage from me, and this was in the time span, or in the time frame of me just finding the space to turn my carrier around. So in about, let's say, 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes maybe, I had basically knocked him dead. Anyhow, we'll queue up into one more game. Once more, we're against Audacious and mixed tier matchmaking, 8 to 10 again, so I am top tier. But this time we're on trap. Still domination, which is good. So Republic, GK, Alsace, North Carolina, Bismarck. So everyone's good to hit except the Repub, which is a bit tricky, but still possible. And then they have Smolensk, Buffalo, Dmitry Donskoy, Charles Mortel, Mogami. Again, nothing tricky except maybe potentially the Buffalo or Smolensk. And then a single Shimakaze as their sole DD. My DD spawned here in the center, and their DD is not dived, so I know that their Shimakaze should be right about here. Just because I'm aiming to demonstrate the APDBs does not mean that I should neglect my other squadrons. Still gonna play to win the game. So off we go. Audacious similarly scouting. So he should be right here. So he kind of matched me in terms of distance, but I know my fighters are actually faster, which means that he should be closer to this side of the map than this side compared to me, because I had to fly sideways and then up through the center. knowing the characteristics of the ships gives you some information, and there you go. So Donskoy should be trailing the DD, so the DD is going for the gap. So I'm going to fly over the gap and expect to see him. I'm going to dive through the AA anyway just to see if I can screen him. Yep, there he is. Kind of going for the channel gap dash. So I'm going to duck out and away. I've lost an aircraft to the combined AA auras of the Dmitry, Donskoy, and Buffalo. Briefly touch that fighter aura. Arm again, outside. Oh, almost missed him. I would prefer not to miss him again, so I'm going to drop the fighter. Really minor damage. Only going to get one more hit off. Swing out and away from the smallest GK. My spotting allows my allies to chunk the Shimakaze, who has no survivability expert, for another 5k or so. Holding down on the air brake. Only another 2.8k for me, but that's still pretty crippling. Buffalo looks like he nosed in there, so he'll make a perfect demonstration target. He's beside a Bismarck and a Donskoy, so I'm going to take the full squadron. Looks like they're only sending a small force south, so that's where I'm going to bring my carrier hull. Only once I see this cap light up am I going to take my rocket planes once more. Because, okay, at that point I'll know that the Shimakaze is out of his smoke. So he's out of his smoke now, but I'm already over here, so I'm going to take these APDBs and bring them out against Buffalo. Now it's not battleships that are actually most under threat from APDBs, but heavy cruisers like the Buffalo, which prefer to be relatively static, because you do shit like this to them, where you break their ankles, because they like to kind of island hug and sit still. Note how I broke his engine with that triple citadel strike, which means he had good damage control, which means if he gets set on fire, he's gonna burn. He's already dead here, more or less, from foolishly kind of sitting somewhere where he would be vulnerable to me. I'm 100% confident he's dead here. I have about 3 times the amount of damage I need to kill him. Now the Shimakaze is in the fighter bubble, but I know he does not have his smoke screen. So once that fighter fades, and it should fade soon, I will be able to murder him. But that's one quick murder with the APDBs, which are an excellent anti-cruiser weapon as long as you go against cruisers that you can see. Now it's going to be basically just myself firing on the Shimakaze once I find him. Maybe I'll go against the GK in the north. I might actually turn around, hunting for the Shimakaze, but I'm more than willing to expend a salvo onto this thinly armored Donskoy first. I want information. Shimakaze lights up on the minimap. I didn't even look at him, but I saw him on the minimap right beside the GK there, you saw. Well, he's not too much of a threat there, so I'm actually going to expend my planes onto the Donskoy, who's fleeing the battlefield. And now we're going to bring the APDBs out against the GK. GK is an excellent target. Now I would prefer the squadron cycle in ideal circumstances, but this is not always possible. Fire burning away on that Donskoy. My team kind of running. It's not the greatest. One of my cruisers should honestly just go inside of B and take it, but people aren't always that bright. I'm gonna ram this full squadron on top of that GK. He should adjust his angle to angle against my enemy allies. Is that Shimakaze? So while I'm circling and hitting this GK, I'll be providing spotting. This spotting is enough in fact to prompt him to smoke. And now just like the Yamato in the previous game, the GK is extremely vulnerable to citadels from the Hakuryu. There's a double citadel there for 17,000. Not quite as good as my strike onto the Buffalo, but It remains to be said that citadel damage onto battleships is not healable, so this guy just took 17,000 unhealable damage, which is not something you want to take as a battleship. Now, because I briefly touched the combined AA, I did lose most of my squadron, which is kind of sloppy on my part, I will admit. That's fine. Okay, my teammates are kind of trolling in the south, throwing their lives away. This time I'm going to drop a fighter. So I'm going to miss here, but with this angle on the GK, I can't miss and he'll die in 2 passes by the Hakuryu torpedo bombers. Less if my allies shoot him. He's reversing quite clearly. Turning is a pain in the ass, so I'm actually going to go after the Donskoy here. Okay, I'm gonna recall here and go after the Shimakaze. I know he doesn't have smoke. One hit onto the Donskoy based on the North Carolina's HP that I can see. He turned north, the Shimakaze that is, toward the Bismarck. So let's finish the job. That's also why I can't see him, or I'm not detected, because he's obscured behind that rock. Okay, only now as I touch the Bismarck's detection radius will I be detected. Looks like he was beached and he had to reverse off. I know he still doesn't have smoke from that earlier smoke. Striking from behind, not great, but the combined aura of the Bismarck is not that much. Should be enough for me to get another pass off at the very least. Not the best break, but the Bismarck is equally vulnerable to APTBs. My teammate's finally growing a brain and taking that friendly cap. Not before these guys rip them a new one though. Lone Bismarck should be easier to dispatch. But the quality of my teammates is how shall I say this politely? Not as high as I would like it. Shimakaze continuing to push forward. Bismarck launching a fighter, which will prompt me to hit him once, then circle around and hit the Donskoy with this package. Alright, a bit too far back, which results in over-penetrations. Alright, too inconvenient to drastically make maneuvers, so I'm just going to expend these on imperfect drops, and as you can see, if you don't put in the work, you don't get that much damage. I do need to push south, so I am actually going to put some effort into eliminating this Charles Martel and Mogami. Okay, they're chasing a carrier, so that's gonna end poorly. So I'm going to start with this Charles Martel because he's the closest to spotting me potentially. You can see the 6.75 kilometer detection radius of my torpedo bombers, allowing me to get quite a jump. Looks like he's turning in, so it suits me just fine. Tried for a bow-in torp. He's going to turn toward the border now. His fighter locks. He's going kind of slow. He dodges once more. See that heel basically tanked through most of his fighter. He's doing a good decent job of just dodging. This time can turn inside of the turn to match. Skimming torpedo strike already hits for 7k. You gonna complete the turn or you want to beach? Looks like he's gonna complete the turn. The enemy is shoving in toward me. So I'm going to move away from the Charles Martel, and I have to hit that Bismarck that I wanted to start on earlier. My allies died chasing a carrier. They're making life difficult for me, of course. Which is long sigh. 2 bombers and a bad angle, not enough to turn. I did break the engine of that Bismarck though, so I know he's damage controlled. I still have a full flight of torpedo bombers. Gonna have to absorb this fighter here, even though it's gonna trim 3 of my torpedo bombers. I don't have a choice in this circumstance. Only 1 hit. There's that fighter lock on. Pop my heal now. I want to make as many passes on this Bismarck as possible. There's that flood and an engine break I was looking for. Alright, can take some time to manually control my hull, lock her into a turn, and in this situation I need to defend myself from the North Carolina still. Gonna take some time, try to adjust my initial approach angle. This battleship has made the same mistake as my allies did, kind of chasing the Audacious. This border is going to force me to take an awkward approach angle, but hopefully we can maybe land 1 torpedo. Nope. We got 1 more attempt. This should be a good hit angle here though, and we'll follow up with dive bombers at this point. Make sure I get those fish in the water. I'm gonna discharge the Alsace, I guess. I have to deal with the closest threat to me, and that's gonna be the Alsace first. Really need my allies to come back. Now, French battleships, not exactly easy to citadel. He's launching a fighter, so I'm gonna dive at him at full speed. He launches it early enough so that it's gonna intercept me after I make the strike. Slams me in the side with the North Carolina. You can see no citadels there. Okay, wasted time trying to retrieve those. You can see secondaries pounding me. You can see being forced to the border is not exactly ideal. Alsace has a pretty good torpedo belt, expecting to die here by the way, with that salvo. Nope, saved by the French dispersion. But the North Carolina does not have French dispersion, so I will inflict what damage I can. My allies did manage to secure a cap lead, and this Edinburgh has been trying his best to help me out. That should be a dodge from him. Looks like he managed to short that torpedo. I'm not sure what happened to it. I don't know why it didn't arm. See, the Alsace AA is kind of poor. Gonna take my time, make sure the alignment's good on this single torpedo. Launch early to make sure it doesn't get de-armed by his bow or him turning in. So we'll get one last hit for finalization. Edinburgh, which has been helping me for a while now, is struggling, as you might imagine. He's gonna die to the secondaries here. So we are gonna have a cap lead, we're gonna trade for that Mogami. But you can see I have 3 low HP teammates, and we're gonna have a point lead soon. But they have a full HP Alsace on the map border. And that Montana is gonna die to the Audacious. Alright, hopefully my Kronstadt stays as... Well, in my opinion, he should probably just stay with the Salem, but now it's up to the Salem, really. He probably can't die. So, pushing toward the Audacious, who has a Kraken, by the way, just saying, this is what happens when you push a carrier, is questionable at best. Now, the Salem is extremely thinly armored relative to Audacious penetration power, so hopefully he has heals left. He's been fighting for basically the whole match though, so Kronstadt's gonna block the cap now. Minute 25. It's basically up to the Salem to survive for minute 25 at this point. I'm not actually sure we even tick fast enough with 2 caps, but we'll see. Based on the fact that the Audacious hasn't come back for him, it looks like the Audacious is fairly far away. You can see the relative speed. Basically, by pushing toward the Audacious, all those ships that were chasing him were decreasing his sortie time and decreasing the time they had for their damage control party to recover between strikes. The Audacious did push into a corner, probably overpushed at this point. So as a result, even his fighters took forever to arrive. Now they do pen the Salem all over, but 30 seconds, he needs a very, very good pass onto the Salem to kill him, and I think the Salem still has his damage control. You can see the Salem's hull is fairly saturated, especially in the bow section. You can see from the damage onto the hull. Anywhere the paint is scorched is basically a saturated section. You can see saturated superstructure and midsection there. So he's taking reduced high explosive damage, which is what the rockets bring. And with 13 seconds left, he's basically invulnerable to anything except Alsace shells. We barely just squeezed past, so in the end the Kronstadt did end up making the right decision, so fine, fair enough, I'll give you some manners. So we do manage to scrape out a win from what was a, as Twitch chat would like to call it, a very Monka-esque game. So 189,000 damage, 13 torpedo hits, 18 bomb strikes this time, of which half were citadels, 6 incaps, 3 kills, 1 fire, 2 floods, 16 spotting ribbons, and a rocket kill. Team score wise, with that kind of performance, we only managed to hit 1800. The Kronstadt, I guess, did a ton of tier 10 damage, or maybe he did most of the damage to the Shimakaze, I'm not sure, but he has cap points and kills, so good enough. Oh, that Aiden that was helping me, also, you'll note, is above me, as a tier 8 shooting at tier 10s and tier 9s. does tend to rack up quite a bit of base experience. Detailed report-wise, 50,000 to the Bismarck, 6 bombs contributing 19,000. There's the Buffalo that we basically crippled with just bombs. 31, 1690, so we basically only citadeled him. So as you can see, versus certain heavy cruisers, if you know what you're doing, the bombs are absolutely crippling. GK again, bomb damage and a torpedo. That's 2 citadels and some overpens, and then a single torpedo. North Carolina, we scored that 1 lucky bomb citadel, and then otherwise damage with torpedoes again. Charles Martel torpedoes, he did a good job dodging, but eventually we did nick him, and even just the nicks did what is more or less half his hit point pool. Donskoy rockets in the beginning, and then 1 torpedo strike, and the Alsace that did contribute to our death was struck with a mix of torpedoes and bombs. You can see here that the French citadel armor resists the APDBs unless you hit at the exact right location. So French battleships are one of the more difficult to citadel targets, and of course the Shimakaze. In this case only rockets, although as you've seen before, torpedoes from Japanese carriers are quite effective at hitting destroyers, so long as you can aim them. Previous game against that Changmu, you saw me miss quite a few times, a little out of practice, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it. It's definitely a very viable option for dealing with destroyers. In terms of planes lost, you can see I lost quite a bit of my plane complement, but do note this is 14, 27, that's 43-ish, 29. So I lost 72 aircraft, not counting the fighters. The Hakuryu has over 100, I believe. I think it's around 106 aircraft, so I used 3/4 of my aircraft complement in this almost extended game. But yeah, over the course of the 2 games, as you saw there, the APDBs are extremely deadly. I did not get to show them off last Hakuryu commentary, but here you are. Hakuryu kind of crushing the hopes and dreams of enemy cruisers and battleships alike with enormous alpha damage. Anyhow, before I go, I'll leave you off with my build. So, of course, for module-wise, first 2 slots, take your plane upgrades, aircraft engines, and air groups modification. Then I take TBM1 in slot 3 for +5 seconds on the torpedo bombers. Then bombers modification 2 for bomber health. This is because the torpedo bombers have access to a heal, so you want to kind of balance out your loadout. Then flight control mod 1 for extra deck space in slot 5, but more importantly extra region time. And last but not least, I prefer aircraft HP, so air groups modification 2. This is a general upgrade which kind of applies to all situations, but if you prefer flight control modification, which gives plane speed, it is a perfectly valid option as well. It's kind of just up to you what you prefer. Now, captain-wise, I'm still using my ranked Hakuryu captain. If it was a randoms only captain, I would consider taking out sight stabilization, but because in ranked you want to kind of min-max your performance a little more, I want to kind of minimize the time my APDBs, which are, as you witnessed, one of my most powerful weapons against cruisers and battleships. I take sight stabilization. So build-wise, you take your core 9 skills still. So that's air supremacy, torpedo acceleration, aircraft armor, and survivability expert. Then follow up with probably last gasp. Actually no, not last gasp, not for the Hakuryu. So the reason why I wouldn't go for last gasp is because the Hakuryu's squadrons are so large. Note that last gasp only restores boost for the last flight, and so if you don't often trim down to the last flight, then you're not going to get too much use out of last gasp. So instead, probably go for these 3, and then you could go probably immediately into sight stabilization if you wanted to, or you can stop for improved engine boost. Alternatively, you can take Concealment Expert to improve the concealment characteristics of your torpedo bombers and of your hull. Note that even with Concealment Expert, you're sitting at 13.7 kilometer detection, so without it, you're sitting at about 15, which means you will get shot at a lot. And if you remember the first game where I got pretty close in order to shorten my sortie time, and took quite a bit of damage from that Yamato and Georgia, not taking Concealment Expert would mean that would be occurring even earlier, and I probably would have died there. So I would say take your Core 9, then take your 10th, and then at 14 go for whichever of Sight Stab or Concealment Expert you prefer. Just note that if you take Concealment Expert last, you will probably have to play a fair bit further back. And then last but not least, finish off with Last Gasp, because it does have those fringe useful moments. And now, those were some pretty decent games there, though as you saw, going after battleships is not the most rewarding in terms of base experience, but a win is a win, and the Hakuryu is extremely good at winning because of that sudden burst damage. And her best burst tool is the armor-piercing dive bomber, so make use of it, perfect your slingshots, and you will absolutely crush people's hopes and dreams and win games. With that said, that'll be all for now, and I hope you all enjoyed. I'll catch you all later. Cheers!